Well, if you think about the US market, it's healthy. We still have a market where consumers need cars. Affordability has improved a little bit compared to the last couple of years. That's the positive background. The other word that comes to mind is turmoil.
Automotive is the most disrupted industry at the moment. There's questions around tariffs, both on steel and aluminum. There has been tariff put on China, from where a lot of products for the industry come about. You have EV regulations that are going through. Tiered suppliers are really concerned about their profitability and their outlook towards where the business is going to end up.
The U.S. auto industry depends on hundreds of suppliers, with gas-powered cars containing around 30,000 parts and electric vehicles about 20,000. Parts often cross the U.S.-Canada, U.S.-Mexico border multiple times. Until recently, the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement ensured free trade, but now tariffs threaten the industry. In 2024, the U.S. trade deficit with the rest of the world increased to over $900 billion, up 17% from the previous year, a gap the new administration aims to address by taxing imported goods.
It's interesting to think about this discussion of tariffs. You think about the U.S. auto trade deficit, about $250 billion. About $100 billion is imported vehicles. And $150 billion is imported components. And those components go into building cars in the US. So the industry has spent the last 20 years or more globalizing. Supply chains have become extremely complicated. And so when you start putting tariffs, you disrupt the industry.
A 25% tariff would mean that the price of the average $25,000 car imported from Mexico or Canada could increase by $6,250.
There's 2,900 pounds or more of metal that goes in a vehicle. And if you just look at 25% on that one, that is at a high level. But then with more visibility around who is buying the metal and from where in the supply chain, it might go up or down. But we expect it to really hurt the bottom line, not only of the automakers, but as well as the tier supplier base.
Due to globalized supply chains, the most American-made car in 2025 is actually Hyundai's Kia EV6, with 80% of its parts being made in North America. Tesla's Model 3 ranks third with 75% North American production. In contrast, only 45% of Ford's F-150 is manufactured here, putting it 91st on the list.
US car makers, Ford is one, but also GM and Stellantis are fairly integrated within US, Canada, and Mexico. And probably the most dependent on this integration of North America is General Motors. Not only do they make more cars outside of the US, but they also make a lot of their very profitable cars in Mexico. I'm thinking about the pickup Silverado. And Stellantis, or the old Chrysler, has been always exposed to Mexico as well, but probably less so over time because they've kind of repatriated some of their highest value production to the US, and they've been a bit more exposed to Canada.
Most vocal CEO has been Jim Farley from Ford in terms of sharing his thoughts about chaos being created with the tariffs. That can tell us everything about what's at the top of the mind for the CEOs, for domestic automakers right now.
If you put tariffs, you disrupt supply chains, you could create a shortage again, like we saw during COVID in a way. Not enough cars, prices had to go up. So that's always a risk. But one thing to keep in mind is also the importance of how global the US auto industry is. Now, if you think about today, GM is the number one market share in the US, but Toyota is a strong number two. Ford is number three, Stellantis is number four, and the Koreans, Hyundai and Kia, are not far behind. And many of those car companies have been building operations in the US. They support employees, families, dealers, service networks, etc. Right now, it feels like there's a tendency to maybe turn North America into a bit of an island. It's also unreasonable to expect that the US auto industry could actually replace that industry that globalized so much that forced them to become better. So it's a net loss to consumers.